Hi, so my name is Daniel Ash. I'm a part of the Media Literacy 2025 class taught by Professor Liao. This is assignment 1, and I have decided to analyze Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the newest installment from Ubisoft. Ubisoft is a French-made video game company. They've made countless favorites such as Tom Clancy's, Far Cry, and of course the Assassin's Creed series. Ubisoft uses a service business model which allows them to spend far less money coming up with the new designs, characters, and stories by just letting them add or tweak to games. They followed this model for a really long time, and they still do. They're still coming out with more Assassin's Creeds, more Tom Clancy's, and more Far Cry games. So they also want people to buy digital content because Ubisoft has said that about 56% of their total sales come from digital content. So they keep coming out with new and new sales, such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey with all its DLCs originating at $120 on sale for about $20, and then even having a $70 version of every single Assassin's Creed game except for the first one. So today I brought two of my friends that have played countless hours of Assassin's Creed, and especially this one that we're looking at specifically. They both bought the $70 version, allowing them to have all the Assassin's Creed games, and it's one of their most favorite games. So today I've brought my friend Joel Cummins and Jacob Allgeier to really show what the first scene is like and what it's like to load into Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So if you guys want to go ahead and start the game, Jacob will be the one playing the game, and I will be commentating with my friend Joel, so we'll have a little more time to talk instead of worrying about actually playing. So Joel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to really look at the game and see what it has to offer.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite games that I've ever played. Really glad that I bought the bundle.
Yeah, so out of all of the Assassin's Creed games, you think this is the best for what qualities? Its graphics, its gameplay, or just all of the above?
It definitely is the most well-made game. Like, they put the most effort into it, and also technologies. Like, it's the most recent one.
Yeah.
So it's the most open one for sure. It's the most open world.
Yeah, and like I said in my paper, it actually has brought in one of the biggest maps to date in games. And if you've played the game, you have to sail across all this land, all this water. It gets really long and tedious. So there's a lot of.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah, it's
like
really
gameplay.
It's really accurate to the time. So we went ahead and loaded up the game here. As you can see, here's the main menu. There's a little bit of a trailer for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is their new installment coming out on November 10th. This is one thing that Ubisoft does amazingly. If you have seen any of the Assassin's Creed trailer, even from Black Flag for the Xbox 360, they all look movie quality like. They all look way better than even the real gameplay. So do you think that Odyssey has the same problem where they kind of made the trailer so good that the gameplay kind of deteriorates from that?
Well, it's just that, like, when you're producing the trailer, you only have like a 3-minute thing. You absolutely have to get perfect, and they can put all kinds of money and effort into one 3-minute section.
Yeah.
And make it look perfect.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the overall game looks really good too. It's in the past that was true with like the trailer looking so much
definitely
better.
With this generation, they've definitely figured it out.
Now everything just looks good.
And even Valhalla was, like, last night we were talking about this, and you said it's an experience to watch that trailer, and it really is. I mean, they've almost made it like a movie, and it's coming out for that next generation of consoles, so we'll see how good that really looks and how that translates. So we're going to go ahead and start a new game here, so that's going to allow us to really zoom in on that first battle scene, because that's what I really want to look at. So we're going to really look at the violence and in this, as well as a little bit of the backlash that Ubisoft faced while they added another main character. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but first we'll start with King Leonidas of Sparta, sorry, and him and his Spartans fighting the Persians that are invading their lands. So I really like how this scene begins, because it shows some of the compassionate nature of how these soldiers are. As they were bloodthirsty soldiers, they still had families and they still had people they cared about.
Have you ever gone fishing with your son?
No, never. A soldier's life is all I've had the honor to know.
And
it's just the brutality of the Spartans, because he's like, yeah, I haven't fished with my son either. He's like, I wanted to, but yeah.
This is all we know. That's all we know. And now, like, the biggest navy, is that correct, that has been part of this time?
So the Persian army was the biggest army ever assembled at this time. It was the largest navy ever. And the Spartans had a small navy, but they didn't have any archers because they thought it was cowardly to have archers. They're at a pretty big disadvantage.
And they're fighting with very dull weapons during the Bronze Age.
They're bronze.
Yeah.
They're like soft metal.
And the violence that we're about to see is so brutal in how they are going and impaling people, even through their head at one point, that you could see how brutal and gruesome that would be, especially using these dull weapons. And very quickly we could see Assassin's Creed pick up. After about 2 minutes of this cinematic, we're already into war.
A slight thing they get historically incorrect is they should have been assembled in a phalanx, which is with the shields all around them. They don't do that.
Yeah, they just have one line here.
Yeah.
But this first impale is so brutal, man, by King Leonidas. So now we're going right into the gameplay here. Real quick, the definition I'm using to analyze violence is one from our past lecture, meaning any real or implied depiction of a lifelike person, animal, or thing is going to be harmed, or was harmed, and or was threatened in a physical, social, or psychological way. So almost all of this constitutes that, as you could see, just clearly violence. I mean, he snapped a guy's neck, he's impaling a multitude of soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, warfare during this time was just
480 BC. This is
it was rough.
Quite a while ago. So this is actually the only time you play as King Leonidas, correct, in the game?
Yeah, you play as his grandson the rest of it.
Or his granddaughter.
Yeah, or his granddaughter.
Which is much better character. So here is the first battle scene. As you can see, just absolute endless violence. You actually can go on forever because there is no time limit in this area. The only objective here is to kill these big soldiers, which they take a little more damage, a little more hits. And like Jacob just showed you, there is a little bit of a magic element to the game. They do have some abilities, especially Leonidas. Can you touch on why Leonidas has these abilities?
Yeah, so the idea behind Assassin's Creed is that the assassins are all kind of a part of the same bloodline, and it's like a race of superior warriors. And supposedly Leonidas is the beginning of that. He has a spear that was created by the first civilization, which is in the game is their explanation for like their origin story. Is some extremely advanced aliens created the world, and they've left behind certain pieces of technology, and one of them is Leonidas' spear, which made him the great warrior that he is, and that gets passed down throughout the Assassin's Creed bloodline, and he's the origin of it.
Oh yeah. A real big part I like about this game, it's kind of stupid, but it is actually really hilarious, is the Sparta kick that they added into the game. People probably know this from 300. I mean, it's a very classic scene they added to the game, and it sounds fantastic like that. It just sounds good, it looks good. They did a really good job with that. It's a funny little addition to the game.
And you can tame animals with it.
Yeah, you can tame animals. You also can jump off any mountain and survive. The game is a little unrealistic at some points, but it does the job.
Get powers. But once again, it's because Leonidas is like the greatest warrior ever. He supposedly had these abilities.
So I think that this game really does have, even though there is a really large amount of violence, we really wouldn't understand the severe nature of Spartans during war if there wasn't this much violence going on. It is really eye-opening to start like this, where you can endlessly fight people and there's no penalties, you just are trying to kill people. But like I said, you wouldn't understand what wartime was back then.
Assassin's Creed does a good job of glorifying violence to the point of it's shocking because you realize how much violence there is. So They're not making it look cool. They're making it like they're really driving home how much violence there was.
Yeah, they definitely are, and that brings up our first theory, which is socio-cognitive theory, meaning that people might learn from TV, but mostly the glamorization of violence and the consequences coming from that violence, which you'll see shortly in the cinematic after this scene. People obviously learn from this, and like Joel said, I think that they do glorify it so much that it gets to a point where you don't want to see any more violence, and a lot of people shy away from thoughts of anger, aggression because of that. They just are pounding it on you as hard as they possibly can. So if you want to go ahead, and I think we've seen enough of the killing, we can go ahead and get to the next part here, which is a boss fight we're going to go straight into, starting with a nice little cinematic before, though.
This game has the best cutscenes.
It does have the best cutscenes. I will say that Ubisoft has a problem, and not as much in this game, but historically with and hiring voice actors that aren't relevant to the regions. So you'll be running around in Greece and maybe meet a Athenian woman who sounds like she's from America, sounds like she's using modern language. They're definitely they definitely have a problem with that, and one thing they really need to fix. One thing they do really well though is bringing in historically accurate gods and all of that. So like Xerxes, if you want to touch on Xerxes, he was pretty important to the story. He is important to the whole game.
Yeah, Xerxes is the leader of the Persian army, and his soldiers worship him as a god. And at this time, he's one of the Persian Empire is one of the biggest empires that's ever existed. And they pretty much conquered everything but Greece. And they step into Greece. They thought Greece would be really easy to conquer because it was just all these little just cities fighting with each other for thousands of years. They've just been trying to kill each other. And then this invader shows up, and they all just banded together. Leonidas brought together all of Greece to resist Persia, and they did, and it worked. They're one of the only civilizations that actually resist Xerxes. He pretty much took over everybody else.
So this is a really just kind of a foreshadowing of how the game's gonna go. You fight a lot of bosses like this. Anyone with a yellow crown on top of their little level bar means that they're a boss and they're gonna be a harder enemy. As you can see, Jacob has to do a little more dodging and evading this guy. He can't just kind of go for it and kill him. It's a little more strategic combat, but it's still a very easy boss because it's the first one. I am surprised you got hit by him there, but we can continue here. If you want to go ahead and finish him off, if you can. Oh. Yeah, Sparta kick him. If you get it, that'd be a classic way to end the fight.
Oh, you don't have any adrenaline.
Yeah, no adrenaline here. Good shield break, and there's the end. And of course, any fight with a boss ends very gruesome. They just go for like the craziest kill when you get that. You have a little like cinematic that you're not actually doing, but it just is very gruesome. So that brings us to our next cutscene, which will be kind of the consequences of war, bringing us back to socio-cognitive theory. And this really shows like how brutal the Spartans' war is, still killing people on the ground, and also finding their own soldiers.
They're burning dead bodies of the enemies.
Yeah.
Xerxes knows of the path behind the mountain. They're coming.
I think that also that Ubisoft did a really good job on depicting the difference between the races of the Persians and the Spartans. They do look clearly different, and for at least this scene, they hired voice actors relevant to where they would be from. But like you can see there, a very violent scene straight through the mouth. That's definitely something some people would have very trouble watching. It was a graphic scene there. And you could just see the anger and aggression within Leonidas.
I like how he said, you'll be surrounded by the morning, and then Leonidas said, we're Spartans, when are we not? Because Sparta has basically been at war with the rest of Greece for the past 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, they're used to being invaded. That's why they were so hard to conquer, because everybody in Greece has been fighting their entire lives.
Yeah. So if you haven't played an Assassin's Creed game, this is Lila. She is our counterpart to Desmond, who is the old modern character in the game. He's notorious for having terrible, boring missions. You're really just a normal guy. But basically, they've come up with this technology to find out who your ancestors are and travel back in time and become them, live their lives. And this is Lila, who is supposed to go with our main character, Cassandra. However, Ubisoft did add a male character at the last moment, which brings us to our next point of why did Ubisoft do this and was it necessary? So this really comes into agenda setting theory, where the ability of news media to influence the salience of topics on the public agenda. They really did influence a lot of people from not buying the game because they were something came out that they added Alexios, a second character, just to sell more copies, as it is a stigmatism that you're going to go ahead and pick Nightmare. It is a stigmatism that male-led titles just sell better. Female titles won't sell. So they did that in order to kind of make more money, but in fact it did lose copies for them as more people decided not to buy the game because it just wasn't right for them to do that. So then Assassin's Creed does give you an option of exploration or guided mode. This means you can have a little more help, or you can just kind of have a free world experience, which is really cool with this ginormous map that you can go around all of Greece and its surrounding islands. So if you want to go ahead in exploration mode, I think that's the best. So then that brings us to the actual picking of the characters, and one big thing to point out here is when they do come up and you read left to right, Alexios is the first character and most likely is going to be picked, especially if you are a male, because I feel as if you play a game that gives you the option of the two genders, you're more than likely picking the one that fits your gender. Especially, and I'm probably sure that's what you did when you started, just picked Alexios based on that.
Yeah, I didn't even, well, my plan was to play through Alexios and then play through Cassandra, but the game is so long that you don't have time to do that. You have to just pick one.
You have to pick one or the other, and like I said, Alexios is not as good as Cassandra. Cassandra seems emotionally intelligent. She seems like she knows what's going on in the world. Alexios seems dim-witted and dull. He has a boring personality.
They didn't try very hard on his dialogue.
No, that's because they brought him in at the last minute, and he wasn't a very high-paid actor. He's from a lot of B movies. He really isn't someone that they needed to add into this honestly very beautiful game. But here we see now that Alexios is first and not Cassandra, and that does take away from your gameplay, as we're going to pick Cassandra because she has much better dialogue, even though they are depicting the same exact cinematic, especially in this first one.
She also has just the voice actor they hired for her is a lot, like,
she had a lot more time.
Right, they spent more money and more time on her character, and then at the last second made her the secondary character.
So I think that they do persuade different types of segmentation, especially psychographic and behavioral, because just like my friend Joel here, who wants to be a history teacher, and that's how he knows so much about the history of Greece and of the Spartans, I think that you were influenced on picking the game because of the historical aspect. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what drew me to the game, is because this is one of my favorite areas of history to study, and I thought it would be really cool to go run around ancient Greece, which it is. I mean, the game did a really good job of showing all the different little villages and city-states and stuff like this. Big difference. There's all kinds of, you can explore all the different islands and everything. It's pretty good. It's pretty endless hours of gameplay.
Yeah, it doesn't really end. What level are you now? Are you around 65?
I think I'm not level 50 yet. I'm like 48.
That's pretty impressive, though. But no wonder you didn't play Cassandra. So, as you can see, one of the best graphically pleasing games. It really is. Seems like it should be on the PS5. It looks next generation. Even compared to their last installment, Origins, which is my personal favorite, it does. So, and then also another type of segmentation that they might be hitting is that people from different locations, especially Greece, might find this inappropriate because they're depicting their history wrong or things like that. And I also think that women and men could view the game differently, especially with the addition of a male character that can kind of take your experience away and just make you not want to play the game in total. So this kind of leads us into Cassandra and kind of learning about who she is. This cutscene is most definitely glitchy. Yeah, they kind of just teleported out of nowhere, but that's okay. This is the first gameplay of your actual assassin, and you can see that it's starting out violent just as the first battle scene was. This is going to go ahead and tell you how to fight, how to parry, how to do everything in the game, but still, this is the basis of the game, killing people invading you or killing people that you're invading. So go ahead and see how Cassandra fights. I really like how she fights. She seems a lot quicker and sleeker than Alexios. She's kind of a boxy fighter. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. Alexios is a lot more like brute strength.
Yeah, and she's more finesse. She's finesse like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the scenes that I wanted to analyze here. We're going to keep having just a little bit of gameplay, kind of show you how open world the game really is, and we're going to do this last part, which is the media literacy. So we're going to really analyze what we should change about the artifact and what they should do in the up and coming installment, which is Valhalla. So based on the analysis, what recommendations would you make, Joel, to the artifact and to Valhalla? I think personally that they really need to do a better job on not forcing you to pick a male or female character and just adding one main story character. Or if they're going to do a male and female, they have to make sure both of them are fully developed characters as well.
If they're going to do two characters, you got to make them equal characters. Because after playing the whole thing with Alexios, and it's like, oh, I should have just played with Cassandra.
Yeah.
Obviously, the game was made to play with her, and they don't really make that clear. Like, they don't really show that you really are kind of supposed to play as her. But I hope in Valhalla they just fix some of the little minor glitchier stuff that Ubisoft always
Ubisoft, me and my friends have an ongoing joke that Ubisoft cannot make a fully complete game, and it kind of is an issue for them. They do have a lot of glitchiness in their game, but they try really hard, and they are making very graphically pleasing games.
Will look amazing.
And that brings up Valhalla, which even though that this game is so violent, they've already said that they're adding another more violent aspect, which is dismemberment to the game. They're letting you cut off people's heads, cut off people's arms. And do you think that is going to change how the game is regulated or rated? Do you think more people won't be able to see it because they're adding that whole new aspect?
Well, I think there's probably a few things maybe there's even some few things they can't show you in the trailer that you're gonna see in the game, but I think they're really trying to show, because you're a Viking in that one, and I feel like they're really trying to show how brutal the Vikings were, because the Vikings have been known as being violent people since they were around, so I think they're really trying to stress, like, this is how the Vikings fought.
And just
which will probably have the same effect as showing you so much violence that it kind of is shocking.
Yeah, I think that it's going to do the same thing with the glorification of violence, and it is shocking. I think that they don't need to change the rating. I think it's pretty much going to be the same thing, rated M for violence and sex. But I don't think they need to add a whole new regulation, say at NC-21, just because of dismemberment and stuff. There's games that are far more violent. Per se, Modern Warfare 2, where you are killing innocent civilians for a very long time.
It's not any worse than Grand Theft Auto.
Or Grand Theft Auto, bring up another game there. Yeah, I mean, those games are much worse. But here's really the free world of the game. You can go ahead and see the map. It is absolutely massive. There is so much to explore.
There's so many islands.
It just keeps going down. You have to sail there yourself. There's just a lot to do in the game, and it all is pretty historically accurate. So instead of censorship or regulation, is there something that they could do to educate the public after they've seen the artifact? Maybe have a cinematic before the game, like explaining why this is just about part of history and it's not something that you should learn from, or something after the game that really explains why they're showing this artifact and what the point of it was. As well as something that Modern Warfare 2 did good is that they gave you about 5 screens that said, this is very violent, please let me know if you want it.
They gave you the option to skip the mission.
Exactly, and I think they should do that a lot with the next Valhalla game, especially if they're going to add dismemberment. I'm sure there's going to be points where it gets that violent. So
if there's going to be a point where you're about to, like, decapitate somebody, they should let you know.
Yeah, they definitely should.
There might be some, like, 8-year-old kid playing. Because, I mean, I started playing these games in, like, 5th grade, and they were way less violent than, I mean, you couldn't really show that much before.
Ezio wasn't crazy.
Ezio wasn't cutting people's heads off. But
Yeah.
now it's just gone. Yeah, they've kind of gone overboard a little bit since they first. Because they have to just top the. It has to be more extreme than the one that came out before it.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of Assassin's Creed,
Yeah,
for them
just
to keep adding on to the game, letting them make less money, using that service business model. They're able to just make a very similar game, but much more pleasing, much more violent, much more good-looking, everything. That's how Ubisoft really makes their money.
I can't wait to play this when I get home.
So the final question here is, what a curriculum for teaching students how to be media literate consumers of this content, and what would it look like? So that meaning that how would we teach kids to understand this content instead of just learning from it in a way of becoming violent, becoming aggressive? How can we really teach kids that this is just a part of history?
Well, you really need to like stress the context to them is what I would say. I would let them know that understand that this is a much different point in history where society was different things were allowed. You just had to be kind of a rougher person to survive, and the game really does a good job of showing just what it like the way of life and what it took to stay alive back then. So as long as kids understand that like this is a completely separate era from our own, and these things are okay then, and because these things happen, we've progressed past the need to be this violent. So I think that they would understand if you really got that through to them, that this is just they're playing by a different set of rules in 480 BC.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the real big thing is that this is 480 BC, over 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
a long time ago, and that stuff really isn't like this anymore. There's no need to be this violent or to have acts of war this constantly anymore. And it's just, we've evolved so much from this.
I mean, we think of the Middle Ages, like people being violent in the Middle Ages, but people in the Middle Ages thought of the Greeks as being
super
like
violent.
Savages.
Yeah. Alright, so that really does end our gameplay here and our video. Thank you guys for joining me and talking about this stuff and playing the game. Jacob, thank you so much for going through it. You did a really good job with that. So that really does wrap up everything, though. I am glad that you guys came to watch my video. I hope you like the gameplay, and I hope that you guys check out Alexios. I'll add a little link to it. It's the same exact cinematic, so I decided not to film it myself, but you can see how much different Alexios is to Cassandra, how dry he is, how dull he is. So definitely check that out, because it will give you an insight to what the difference between the two characters are, and it might lead you to believe that Ubisoft is super wrong for doing this, especially that they just underdeveloped the character crazily, like he's just not there. So yeah, please check that out, and thank you for watching my video. I'll see you guys in class next week. Thank you.